or where am I? Caretaking. So I always, my caveat around caretaking, so I say, what's the difference between caretaking and caregiving? So caregiving comes from a true, authentic desire to give to other people. There's zero strings attached. It is from an authentic place of, I love this person, I want to do for this person. Caretaking is actually more about us. I am doing for you either because I expect something or want something in return, or I'm doing for you because it makes me feel better about myself. So like, you're feeling upset or angry or you're struggling, let me fix it for you. I'm doing that because I'm uncomfortable that you're uncomfortable, not actually because I truly desire. That might be part of my desire, but a lot of that is I don't have the capacity to sit in my feelings of anxiety because you're not okay. We do this a lot with our kids. I understand it. Nobody wants their kids to not feel okay, right? But the like, I need you to be okay, a lot of times is actually more because I'm not okay that you're not okay. And so what happens, we actually steal their process from them. We take away the potential for them to expand the ability to be in those hard emotions, to figure it out for themselves, to learn to trust themselves through getting through that experience, right? We take that when we do that, when we swoop in, right? So thinking about that, like, okay, when I'm in this state of giving, like, is this caregiving? Is this caretaking? Is there any kind of string? Is there any expectation attached to this, right? And usually when there is, we can say, okay, this is a bit about caretaking, not caregiving. Well, and I would say that a lot of us, I think a lot of times it starts out as caregiving and it slips quickly into caretaking. Because I might say, I love this person, so I'm giving unconditionally, I'm caregiving. But even if very, very subtly, I have a desire to be loved in return. I have a desire to be held and cared for. There's still an expectation in that, even if it's really subtle. And I'm not blaming that. I mean, of course we want to be loved when we give, you know what I mean? But the point is that there's still a seedling of expectation in that. And so that's why you can see there's like, it's like a fine line, you know? Okay. Repression of feelings, needs, and wants. And I kind of partner this with knowing what the hell your needs and wants and feelings are, right? Because a lot of times when I do this work, I'll be like, you know, you hear all the time, you have to express your needs, you have to express your wants. And so many people are like, I don't even know what the fuck my needs and wants are. How do I express it, right? And so a lot of times in the beginning stages of this work, it really is, again, it's that sitting with the self. What do I really need? What do I really want? What do I really desire? Where is it coming from? Doing some of this self-inquiry, right? Before putting it out there. And then there's the conversation around needs and wants. Is this really a need or is this a want? Because I would argue that a need is something that keeps us alive. Food, water, sunlight, right? That a want is something that would be amazing. We all are deserving of, but it's not necessarily a need. And here's the thing. One of the hardest things, again, about especially like long-term kind of romantic relationships or attachments that are, you know, contained through government paperwork and things like this, right, is saying, are we in alignment or not in alignment? Can this be a no-fault zone? Can we have been in alignment at one point in our lives and are we not in alignment now? And can that be okay? Does somebody have to be wrong for that? Or can we just say, I love that for you. That doesn't feel in alignment for me. Can we just call this what it is? Why do we have to try to hammer somebody into being what we need them to be for us to feel comfortable? Either doesn't tell who we're talking about, right? But I think, again, even the way that we look at, I mean, this is my personal belief, but I think a lot of times even the way we look at romantic relationships, it's this fear. This fear of loss of attachment is what's driving the bus. It's not about my true love for you to be the most fulfilled, authentic person that you can possibly be. It's about, don't leave me. How dare you? I'm owed this from you, right? You need to be this because I say you need to be this, because I own you. You are my husband. You are my wife, right? And so I'm not saying we toss all that out, you know, maybe with the bathwater, but I think that you're just seeing a lot right now of like people starting to really look at and examine the way that we hold relationships. I don't celebrate longevity as any form of marker for success of a relationship. I don't do it. These people that are like, oh my God, it's my grandparents' 50th wedding anniversary. And I'm like, they hate each other and they have not barely spoken to each other in 20 years. I don't congratulate that. I don't. What I'm going to congratulate actually is like when I look at somebody, I always use her, but like Danae, my best girlfriend, who her and her husband, now ex-husband, came to each other. They did a lot of work and they were like, we are no longer in alignment, but they are still best fucking friends. Wow, so they respect each other immensely. They're amazing co-parents. They're not perfect. They fight. They get under each other's skin or whatever.
Was he ever angry when that came to that, or they both?
They both. It was kind of a mutual thing. It was like, we are not loving each other well. Mm-hmm. Loving each other well is actually not staying in this container. I'm not able to love you the way that you deserve to be loved as a human being by trying to force you to stay in this container with me, and vice versa. I love you enough to actually say, this is not working, right? And that's really hard for a lot of people to wrap their brains around. But again, love or fear? Love or fear is what we were talking about last night. Is this love or is this fear, right? Making decisions. So I call this like, are you the polar? So are you the person who, when there's something going on in your life or you need to make a decision, you're like, let me call my best friend and like go through the entire thing and like, well, what do you think about this? And have you considered this? And let me call my work wife or my work husband. What do you think? So, and then there was this, and then they did this. And like, what do you think I should, let me call my mom or my dad. And then, well, my kids. And you're like polling, right? You're getting the pulse. Like, what do you think about this big thing I got to decide on or think about or work through, right? A lot of times that comes from, I don't have a solid enough sense of myself to know what my gut believes and what I know I should do, number one. So I got to kind of get the consensus from people in my life, right? But also, if I make the air quote wrong decision, I don't have to take responsibility for it because all y'all told me to do it. There's a little bit of that in there too. There's a little adolescent, like, you take the responsibility, you know? But again, not always, but I find this happens a lot with people who struggle with codependency, you know? Controlling and manipulative behaviors. This is the one I always say, like, trigger warning. I'm about to talk about how we're all controlling and manipulative. But things like passive aggressiveness, that's a very manipulative way to get what we want, right? Or even just aggressiveness. Using blame and shame, it can be very manipulative and controlling, right? Even again, like withholding information, right? Like, I'm gonna keep the peace by withholding information that I know is gonna upset you. I am manipulating our dynamic to go the way I feel most comfortable with it going. That's manipulation. I am not allowing the person on the other side to have full access to the information. I'm not allowing each person to be authentic and autonomous in their decision. I am in control. And again, it doesn't come from a malicious place. It comes from fear and security, and I want to keep myself safe. But at the end of the day, it's still control. I'm protecting against anxiety, right? It's not authentic connection. Right? And then offering unsolicited advice and direction. Also one of my favorite ways to try to control other people and manipulate other people. Yeah, we can all be guilty of it, right? I usually like to say to people, to have this practice of when somebody comes to you and they want to talk about something, before you even open your mouth, pause, take a breath and say, would you like me to just listen or would you like me to give you feedback and advice? And let them be the one to decide. And if they say just listen, then shut the fuck up and listen, right? Do your best to honor what they're asking for. It's hard. It's really hard, right? Weak boundaries, which we kind of already talked about, or poor dysfunctional communication. So I always talk about communication just kind of in passing because I really feel like so much of this, again, this is learned, right? We don't come out of the womb not having good boundaries. We don't come out of the womb not being able to express ourselves. Our kid expresses herself very well. She's been expressing herself since she was born. You know, if I blink my eyes and she's 20 and suddenly she's struggling to express her feelings, that came from somewhere. She wasn't born that way. When you look at kids, when they're toddlers especially, they have no fucking problem communicating themselves. I don't like that. You're making me feel this. You know, they're so expressive. And over time, and I guarantee we all were, to a certain extent, there's personality differences and whatever, but we learn what is acceptable to you. Are you gonna take your love away from me if I'm too big, right? Are you gonna give me the cold shoulder if I act this way? If I'm too this, are you gonna respond? And we're like little information, we're just taking it in, you know? And then we pivot and we evolve ourselves and we pivot according to what the feedback we're getting is, you know? But we don't come out like that. So communication, I always look at it as like a lot of the stuff that we do as therapists. It's like sometimes it feels very rudimentary. Using I statements, right? Because we literally don't learn this shit. It's like now we're 40 and we're like, fuck you, you're this and you make me feel this way. And it's like, well, how about if we start to talk about it from this perspective, you know? And that's because we just don't have functional communication, most of us. You know, we're not taught the skills. Communication is a skill, really.
Teach that in yoga, like in
An inability to tolerate the unknown or loss of control. I mean, this is fear. Just embodied right here, right? We're constantly trying to like make sure that we're in control. We think we're in control of things, right? This fear of the unknown. I mean, a lot of this again has to do with like this lack of feeling that I'm held. It's like I've got me. Something else has got me. I'm okay. You know, regardless of what happens, of how hard things are, of the depths of my despair or upset or whatever, I can ride it out and I will be okay. I'm still here. I'm still a person. I'm still solid in my sense of self, right? It's a yes and. Nobody likes suffering, you know, but it's part of life. Can I be with it? Knowing that I'm still gonna be here on the other side. No, I mean, a lot of us, when we're in the hardest parts, we literally feel like we're gonna die. You know, that's real. But a lot of that like inability to tolerate that unknown, that anxiety, you know, that existential kind of anxiety fuels a lot of these ways of showing up in relationships. And I was just throwing this list, like you don't have to have grown up in an addictive household, because I think that's a common misconception to struggle with codependency. Like I say, we all embody it to some extent, but I mean, you know, your parents themselves were also highly codependent. Sure, addiction helps. Narcissistic traits in parents, which is also a generational study that's happening right now, you know, and it's based on the way that just different generations parent the next generation. It comes from a lot of places. It's not just the addiction lens, which I just say that to say, like, throw that old way of looking at codependency out. It's limiting, you know, and it makes a lot of us feel like, well, I'm not the addict, so I'm not, you know, and it's like, no. And then I think I probably threw in most of these. I just want to make sure. We talked about this idea of empath, right? How I love it. I think it's a beautiful thing. I don't necessarily believe that it's like a spiritual gift bestowed upon us. I think it's a highly developed skill over years and years of needing to practice for survival. And it can be a lovely gift so long as we are aware of it and it's not in control of us and how we move through the world, right? But when it starts to be the tail wagging the dog, it's not the healthiest place to be, right? And we need to kind of look at that.